Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. I am, I'm excited about this. This is episode 8, but it's also part 2. So, Rick Smith is joining me again on the podcast for this episode. Today, we're going to talk more about the Green Team here at Saints Peter and Paul Jesuit Church, which is our environmental justice team. Some places call it creation care team. So, we call it the Green Team because we're encompassing a lot of the elements of social environmental justice. And so we talk about the Green Team. We also talk about creation care itself, a little bit about the Catholic teaching, um, and then Rick shares about how he's implemented creation care into his own life, including talking about his condo association and how they have banded together to make environmental changes to where they live. And so the Green Team is still fairly new here, but they have done a lot to implement, to educate and encourage the congregation to really embrace this idea of creation care, taking care of um, in your own living space, right? How can we participate in little ways that add up? And I'm thinking about this is really appropriate that this is going to be posting this week, since here in Michigan we are having extreme weather, and there's heat advisories that are posted today. I think the heat index is 110. Um, and a lot of this is because of environmental issues, right? And so we need to take care of our planet. It starts in our own lives. What are some of the small things that we can do? And one of the things we didn't talk a lot about in this episode, we for Lent, the Green Team put out a ways to fast that are environmentally focused. And so things like I'm going to fast for Lent to stay away from single-use plastics, um, make sure I bring my cloth grocery bags with me, reusable grocery bags with me to the store, those kind of things. And even though Lent has ended, I wanted to just pose this option to you as summer is here. What are some of the ways that you can be conscious this summer? So maybe that means that you make sure that you have your water bottles with you when you're out and about running your errands. I know there's stuff all over the internet, right? I see people post these memes about, oh, when I was growing up, we never carried a water bottle anywhere with us. Yes, and a lot more people had problems with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So let's embrace the water bottle. It's an excuse to go out and buy a reusable one for the summer. Take that with you. Hey, if you're hosting graduation parties, instead of buying a bunch of single-use plastic water bottles, can you borrow a giant container to fill with ice water for the graduation parties? So, maybe think about some ways that you can implement some small changes this summer to your own life. And then coming down the road next month, we are actually going to have another guest come on to talk about Laudato Si. We mentioned it a little bit in this episode. Um, so Laudato Si is Pope Francis, who has recently gone to glory. His teaching on creation care and really encouraging the church to embrace it. And so we're going to talk more about that and then what it looks like to embrace creation care. So we'll delve into this even more um, in next month on another episode. But in the meantime, I just hope that you will enjoy everything here and just you'll be one, that you'll be educated, and two, that you'll be encouraged to participate in your own ways.
Now, one thing buried in those orders, tucked away, was we also don't fund environmental justice. And that's where the Green Team comes in, but also Laudato Si and this UN conference on sustainable development, Rio Plus 20. One of the intentional parts of that was to align social policy and environmental policy. And so social justice and environmental justice are integral. That thread I had, if you look at who funds these think tanks, it's ones arguably it's companies that have the biggest environmental impact. So all this social stuff, that's what gets the attention. The shift in environmental policy is also happening, and that is because they are intrinsically intertwined. It's people of color, people with low incomes, people who work long hours. They're the ones who face environmental exposures. And if you ban funding any research to identify, show environmental impacts, though it's my understanding from the press that accreditation bodies for law and psychology have already preemptively caved and removed any accreditation standards around diversity, even though they aren't legally required to do so yet. So that's kind of, we're in a bit of a holding pattern with social work education because right now our accreditation body still requires us to teach students how to work with people who are not like them and to treat people fairly, also to comply with the law. The laws of this country haven't changed. We still have an Americans with Disabilities Act. We still have a Civil Rights Act. We still have a Fair Housing Act, and those all grant us rights. We still have an equal opportunity employment. We also have state law, and our state laws have protections as well. And professionals need to know about them in order to do their jobs. From a Catholic social teaching perspective, one element of that is solidarity and the preferential option for the poor. Another element is subsidiarity, which is to recognize that business and issues should be handled at best at the most local level possible. In the Catholic context, parishes should have some autonomy. By the way, I'm chair of the Green Team here. But it makes sense because it has been in alignment with my research and teaching on sustainability. The Green Team came out, Father Gary Wright. What had happened in the parish is the Pope Francis Center grew so big it became a standalone nonprofit. They still minister here, but they also have this brand new, incredible facility a few blocks from the University of Detroit Dental School, right off 96. And Father Gary said, "Well, what are we going to do as a parish?" He brought a group of parishioners together, and we started a year-long discernment process. And one of the things that came out of that discernment process was we should have a green team. Really embraced the vision of Laudato Si to care for the common home and have a Detroit that took care for creation seriously. We are in particular concerned about the impact of greenhouse gases on global climate change. True, what we do impacts globally, but it also impacts locally. One of the projects I worked on here in my day job, I've been working with the Wayne State College of Engineering, Communication Science, Political Science, Eastside Community Network. They're a nonprofit on the East Side. Go figure. And that they were founded by a parishioner from Sacred Heart, which is kind of in our Jesuit family, maybe unofficially, maybe officially, I'm not sure yet. But Father Tim is their acting pastor. Maggie DeSantis from Sacred Heart started Eastside Community Network as an environmental justice organization. That there had been a settlement agreement based on some kind of industrial pollutant that gave them kind of a base endowment, I think, that allowed them to address well-being from this kind of very Catholic ecological context that integrated the person, the family, the community, and the environment. That in order to have thriving families, you have to have a clean environment. You have to have businesses that hire people locally. And their biggest, one of their signature projects, there's a strip mall at Alter and Mac that has an Aldi, and that was completely financed by Angela Brown, who recently went to glory. She and Maggie went door to door and got $50 from everyone in the neighborhood. And that they said, you probably will never see this money, but you'll know that this grocery store is here because you put this $50 in the hat. And there's a plaque there with all the people who contributed. Anyway, and that Aldi is still there and it's still a full strip mall. And that was built, I think, in the 80s or 90s. Anyway, but one of my students ended up getting a job there. And she was brought on to lead the climate justice initiatives. they had a Lower East Side action plan, and they'd been doing a lot of work with the University of Detroit to plan for climate change mitigation. And then we got a really big flood in June 2021, and FEMA actually contacted the School of Social Work. They contacted my dean, Cheryl Kubiak, and we got some students to call and offer assistance for people who'd applied for FEMA funding on how to do the appeals. That led us, FEMA asked us, you've got to have classes in this. So we developed an environmental justice course. I think communications developed a disaster communication course. Social work as a disaster or a crisis response course. And then I wrote a planning grant to plan, what technology do we need to mitigate the next flood. We also wrote a grant with the East Side to fund interns to work on these initiatives. And most of the work, all I did was convene people once a month plan, and my student Aaron Stanley did most of that legwork. But the different community members, different organizations, we had people from, members of elected office, that their staff would come, homeowners associations, retired school teachers, what have you, all meeting together. A year later, Stephanie Chang, Senators Chang puts in, she gets $1 million for this. The Great Lakes Water Authority shifts their funding and they shifted over around $800 billion to relieve the amount of water coming from the suburbs into the city. How much can they keep upstream with retention ponds, green stormwater infrastructure? They are increasing capacity at the Freud Street pumping station, or not pumping. There's a Connor Creek was turned into a sewer, and that pipe goes. It has to turn. It doesn't quite get to the river, then it turns right, and then goes along Jefferson to the wastewater plant out in southwest Detroit. And so they increased capacity at the facility that pumps the sewage from that corner over to the Jefferson. And, that residents weren't happy with all the extra construction, but, if that works, might prevent flooding because Detroit, if you didn't know, podcast listeners, Detroit has a combined storm and sanitary sewer system.
Yeah.
And what that means is the water coming from your toilet and coming off the street goes into the same pipe. And so when your street floods, it can back up into your toilet if you don't have a plumbing with a stop back flap valve.
Oh, yeah.
And also, pro tip, make sure you get your sewer lateral scoped by a plumber. I don't know. I think the optimal time is once every 15 years. If you have the cash, do it more often. Because if that tree in your backyard is breaking into your sewer lateral and blocking it, you could have a surprise.
Yeah, we had that. I'm in Redford, and when we bought the house, all the pipes are clay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
yes.
so that just naturally cracks over time, and then the tree roots just so.
And we've got clay pipes all over the east side.
Yeah.
And then the city actually did something. So in most jurisdictions, the municipal water authority is responsible for the pipes under the street or the alley, and then the homeowner is responsible for the one that goes from that pipe to their house, which usually runs under the backyard. In Detroit, it could be the front yard in other cities.
It's front yard for where we're at, yeah.
Also, don't build a shed on the alley in case the city needs to excavate a sewer main. So most of the city of Detroit, the sewer mains are in the alley. The drinking main is in the center of the street. But in other cities, it's not quite that way. So that ended up, we did the planning grant. We didn't get money we proposed to the National Science Foundation to develop an early warning communication system that we would electronically connect people's sump pumps so that if a bunch went off at the same time, it could send an alert. Right. We did not. The reviewers didn't think we'd be able to pull it off in a year. It's worth a try, in my opinion. But that process, a lot of other entities put in some money and changed how they were doing business. The GLEWA swears that even the changes they made, the rains we had last summer, for example, we didn't see the level of flooding that we saw in previous years. Another thing we want to talk about related to the green team. So one of the things we did every year for the green team is we help the parish plan Season of Creation. Podcast listeners don't know. Season of Creation, I believe, has ancient roots. Father Gary told me that Christendom, which would include not just Catholic, but Eastern Orthodox, Anglican, the churches with the apostolic succession,
Right.
they used to celebrate Amber Days so that there was a season for every solstice and equinox.
Got it.
So we're kind of know Christmas is around the solstice, the winter solstice, Easter around the spring equinox. People may not be conscious of the feast of St. John the Baptist unless you're a Detroiter, um, because that's when we have our fireworks, and you have to know Detroit history to understand why we have our fireworks on the feast of St. John the Baptist and not 4th of July. Because we used to be a French city, that's why. And Montreal, Quebec celebrates that with the same kind of passion and intensity we do. So that's, right after the summer solstice. And then many Catholics know about the Feast of the Exaltation of the Cross, but that is around the fall equinox, just when our Jewish brothers and siblings are celebrating Yom Kippur. And these all there were Amber Days. We don't do Amber Days anymore, but the Eastern Orthodox, I think it was the Greek Orthodox, I think they were first in kind of saying, let's do a season of creation. It would be September and culminate in this. And as it turns out, we culminate season of creation with the Feast of St. Francis, which is very appropriate because St. Francis had that integral ecological vision, brother sun, sister moon. And we've done all sorts of things to celebrate season of creation. We'll go to Manresa, do the labyrinth, plant trees with Greening of Detroit. And one thing we did is we toured my condo association. My condo happens to have a member or two from Jesuit and then some members from St. Peter Paul Jesuit. And we have a sustainability committee, so I'm on the sustainability committee for I'm on the green team, not only for St. Peter Paul, but also my condo association. So one thing is we're a reused building. It used to be a auto showroom, and now it's condos.
Really?
Yeah. We joined the Detroit 2030 district, which these 2030 districts, you can find chapters all over the country. They typically have a relationship to a local utility, and ours has a relationship to Detroit DTE Energy. And, they have educational events on how to make your buildings more sustainable and more efficient. And one of the ways they do that is you can set up your utilities to report through a dashboard called EPA Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And now I believe there's an executive order to eliminate all of that, but we'll just have to cross our fingers.
I will say that St. Peter and Paul have just joined that.
Yay!
We are now getting our data. Yeah.
Yay! And 2030 district convinced the city of Detroit to pass an ordinance requiring commercial buildings to report and then share those reports electronically with the city so that the city can assess energy efficiency. Now, these things don't cost anything except people's time. And I was happy to, when we first started, we had to input the utility bills manually until we could get everything aligned to have it just electronically stream.
Yeah,
and now
it's
easy.
electronically being
Yeah, now it's easy. I just have I open up the dashboard, there it is. Now, one of the things, now that we're all in, the 2030 district works with it's called the West Michigan Green Building Council, but actually it handles the whole state. I think I was confused for a while, but I guess West Michigan formed a chapter first. And so every year they do a Michigan battle in the buildings. And last year we won for most efficient multifamily building. We had had a dramatic reduction from the year prior, and we did that by fixing our broken garage door and also optimizing the time between when it would come up and go down. And in the winter, that makes a difference.
Oh, yeah.
We have LED timers on our all lights. We put in EV chargers, and we have about 20-ish EVs in the building or plug-in hybrids. I have a Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid.
And a bicycle.
I have two bicycles.
You have two bicycles?
Yes. I bike to work. I drove here, which was a mistake. I should have biked here because the Grand Prix has blocked off every other thing. The big ticket item for our building was and this is why I wanted to get the numbers ready, We have a 94.4 kilowatt rooftop solar grid, and that offsets 50% of our common area energy use. Common area meaning hallway lights, the garage doors, exterior lighting, the heating. We have like electric HVAC in the halls. It also having that much solar capacity also made it feasible to put in more EV chargers. Because for what at first DT wanted us to install a second line of service, and that was not cheap. And at first they said, well, you only have enough capacity for maybe 8 chargers. And then when they realized we had solar, we were able to have more like 20 chargers. We also tuck pointed, so we have a brick exterior, and the masonry, get cracks over time. And then the winter wind comes and blows through, so a little tuck pointing help. So the EV chargers cost about 120,000, and then each. But then there was a 45,000 rebate. Some of that came from DTE, and I think some of that was actually tax credit. The solar array was about 200,000, and we had to do a vote of the membership, and we couldn't get enough. But we asked any of the folks in the building if they would just pay, and we had enough people willing to pay, so we formed a power purchasing agreement. So the 8 of us, and I have 2 shares, power purchasing agreement. We bought the array and we sell the electricity to the building, and we guarantee the building that they will pay 20% less. We charge 20% less of whatever DT is charging that month. So as DTE goes up, we get a little more, but it's less than they would have if they just didn't have the solar at all. Tuck pointing was about 80,000. Not cheap to do that for tuck pointing. And so yeah, that was possible with these rebates from DTE. They also went in and did an energy audit of every building. Pro tip, if you haven't had your local utility do an energy audit, you can schedule one. And, if you're savvy and you already have your low flow toilet and faucets and LED lights, that when I bought my condo, one of the first things I did is I replaced the tungsten halogen lights with LED. That did really cut my electricity bill. This year we have a lot of dogs in the building, and makes the grass really hard to grass gets way too much fertilizer than it needs. So we wanted to replace it with clover, but apparently that's become more controversial than we anticipated.
Really?
Some people think it will look bad. It's a micro clover. It's not like wild clover. It's specifically designed.
Yeah, we bought some to plant underneath this one area of our yard, although our dogs like to eat it. So
yeah,
it's safe for dogs. That's why we.
Right. And yeah, we would get the kind that's safe for dogs. There's a kind that isn't. So we got the state award. We got an honorable mention for the 2030 district award because 2030 district doesn't break out the awards by type of building. But hey, so we put in our lobby the 2 awards, say, hey, we're.
Did you get a pizza party with this award? I just want to know.
So when we got the award, they paid for our registration at the award ceremony. It was at their annual conference, and that year it was in Grand Rapids. So that included breakfast and lunch, and then a closing reception.
Nice.
So yeah, we did have an open bar, but then we had to drive back to Detroit.
Well, yeah.
Couldn't take advantage of the open bar. I wasn't driving, so I could. No, it was pretty good. It was at the Oh no, I thought it was at the Amway. I think it was at the Amway Grand Plaza Hotel.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a pretty. If you're going to Grand Rapids, it's typically where you're going.
If it wasn't that, it was next door, like maybe the Marriott. But it was good food. They have all the vendors who do the green building materials monitoring, and I will give a shout out to I think it's Thane. It's a West Michigan business that's women owned, and I'm forgetting her name, but she gave a keynote. And I talked to her at the exhibit booth. She says, when I became CEO, I made sure that we have the most memorable swag. So it was like this, like she was handing me a designer leather, like it wasn't real leather, but like this very beautiful, it was a bag, but it looked like something you would wear at the opera that had their logo on it. And they do like enterprise monitoring of buildings. They have all the sensors and they do consulting. Really good work in that space. So those were the main bullets. If we think of formation as a Catholic, like my elementary school was run by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Nazareth, who were very prominent in the east side of Detroit,
Oh yeah.
ironically. And one of my aunts was I had an aunt and a cousin in that order. I don't know if they're still active because I know they closed Nazareth College in the another aunt was an IHM sister and maintained I used to guest lecture at Marygrove College in their social justice program. And so I kind of grew up with this one exposure to the Catholic social teaching, and also the precursors of like the Sisters of St. Joseph. We didn't have Laudato Si back then, but they would have us go out and it's like God wants you to clean that playground. And it wasn't like they really had a spirituality about it. And we would also clean the city park. And they did not want us to waste food. Like if the we would put our leftover, if we didn't eat everything, it would go in the bin. And if it got too high, the sisters would come and we would have to line up and make an active contrition over. We'd line up and they would show us all the food that was wasted. We'd have to do an active contrition right there during lunch.
It's intense.
It was, but it's sort of
It's going to be the 70s, right?
it was the 70s. It was the 70s. And they had modified habit, and I could imagine how. No, I remember because my aunt did have the full habit, and then they went down to the modified habit because the full habit was like a full black habit with
Yeah.
like it was. Yeah, I've been in a Franciscan parish, Paulist parish. One of my parishes had a Marianist, and each of the orders has their own spirituality, but what's common is the importance of prayer and contemplation. Both the Franciscans and Jesuits now really embrace care of creation. And that's been expanded to the whole church with Pope Francis' vision that every Catholic institution, every household really experiences an ecological conversion where they see themselves as part of, an integral part of creation, not separate from, that we are united in solidarity with our brothers and sisters around the world and also all living species as children of God, and that we work together to joyfully care for creation. That is not the cultural moment that we're being confronted with, which is still part of the paradigm of success means lots of money and consumerism and spending and status symbols. And that's tough. We really wrestle with that in the green team. How do we do it when the whole world is structured in a way to be, as Father Gary said, a throwaway society? This is where, our hope is the movement of the Holy Spirit to help guide these. Like we have resources, we have the science, we have the science of community and community development. We need that spiritual push. And I've been able to, we have that vehicle here, and now we have a bishop. Also, his priorities care for creation, also care for the immigrant, which are also integrally connected.
Right.
We're seeing a massive rise of global migration due to conflict, but also due to disasters that are climate induced, and we'll continue to see that. So, yeah, is the church ready for this? The word Catholic means universal.
Right.
That's unequivocal. We are a universal church that is open to everyone. Maybe I don't think there's any countries, back in the day when you were required to be Catholic because your king or queen
Right.
was. That's not true anymore. But there is a value to that. The universality. Even I think Vatican II had really embraced that as the call of baptism being something voluntary. Like